Hi, my name's Seth Hebert, and I'm here to talk a little bit about the stone raft and the movement of the peninsula's effect on the character, and the character's movement's effects on the characters. So, with that complicated sentence said, I'll get to it. As you can see here, Fife is in this first description of and I think this is an important part of this novel, is he sets up through a sort of literary device where he breaks the fourth wall and says, writing is extremely difficult. It is an enormous responsibility. You need only think about the exhausting work involved in setting out the events in chronological order, first this and then that, or if more conducive to the desired effects, today's event before yesterday's episode. So I don't think it's an accident that he's talking about the nature of cause and effect, and it's laid out right at the beginning of the novel. We read about a man throwing a stone into the sea, a woman drawing a line in the sand, and in the invisible events and the happenings around them that affect the world. But is it those things that are affecting the world, or is the world affecting those things? And I think that's the question we should be asking as we go through the novel. So this is Fife is in northern Portugal, right up there at the top, and it's nearby is revisited later when they come back to the Blue String. And this is where Joaquim Sasa starts. And then right below it, the first leg of this journey here, he travels from Fife to Tagus, or Tagus, I'm not entirely sure. And he meets Joaquim Sasa, he meets Jose Anaico there. It's not Anacio, but Anaico. So there is a kind of a bonding that happens over their shared understanding, not the same understanding, but a shared understanding that something has happened, or they have done something. And there's, again, going back to the cause and effect there, neither character are sure if they have changed the land or if the land has changed and they are just witnessing it. So we'll move on. So then the two of them get together and they travel to Alentejo or Joe, and in this province they make their first stop together, and it's right before they get to Spain. So they're getting kind of nervous as they're about to cross the border. So Joaquim worries about entering Spain, and it's an interesting point because thinking of the Iberian Peninsula, which is now drifting off into the sea, which is an island, as split by borders within the island itself, is kind of strange. You can't travel to the land that that you live on, that's probably draws parallel to places like East and West Timor and divisions in other peninsulas, which are basically islands, like North and South Korea. Now the starlings continue the journey on with them, but even though the starlings start to make Joaquim and Jose a little nervous. He compares them to Alfred Hitchcock's The Birds. If you've seen that movie, you know that the birds are murderous. there's also, and also the land itself is described in a way that, is not, it is foreboding in a way. And so they get to the border, and the Starlings bomb the guards. So apparently they had nothing to worry about when they get across the border. We get to Granada, and now Granada's a pretty important place in the novel. It's where we introduce Pedro Orce, and I think a very important concept to this novel, which is a place of where we can see how history has shaped the peninsula, and in its current sorry, I lost my place here. Its current place in the world. Now, this is historically, this is a place where the Moors and the Christians fought at the end of the what was it, 1400s? I actually should find that out. But has become a graveyard, and this foreshadows of an interesting point at the end of the novel, that these things, these things grow into these bloody events grow into new things. Now, whether or not the author is saying that out of violence comes new things is up in the air, but I think the quote here says a little more. At the right season, when there is rain, some greenery will sprout on the ashen field. Nowadays, the low verges cultivated with great effort, the plants dry up and die, they revive and flourish. It is man who still has not learned how cycles repeat themselves. With him, it is once and never more. To explain that quote a little bit more, we have this graveyard, and out of it, regardless of what man does, it grows out. It flourishes. And I believe what the author is trying to say is that out of there have been many failed policies, and we have yet to really master or to create policies or politics that help us in the long run. I probably said that poorly, but A for effort, right? Okay. So then the three of them decide to go to Gibraltar to watch it float off into the sea, and I think that's pretty interesting because Gibraltar has represented like European colonialism, and it's interesting because we tend to think of colonialism as having occurred in the Caribbean and Asia, but here you can see the British legacy of colonialism even within Europe itself, arguably Africa, but close enough that the Spanish definitely cared about it. And it's an interesting, he uses an interesting term to describe the people who've come to the shore to watch it. He says that they've migrated there, and I think we can see more about this these themes of migration throughout the novel. Here, they're migrating to witness a split in between the old and the new policy or the new politics. They also refer to the British Empire as Albion, which I think further goes into describing the relationship that the Iberian Peninsula has had with Europe, well, and more about history that we could see in the previous section where we talked about the Moors and the Christians. Okay. Then they go back to Orsay. And in Orsay, in this chapter where we're describing Orsay, we described as not being on the maps. And so possibly this could be talking about sort of the marginalization of this area, which obviously is important to the novel in this humble place where, where Orsay, Pedro Orsay dies, is born a new, well, and then there's the rod of destiny, I believe, is planted on his grave, and it flowers into something new. So perhaps the novel is talking about how these marginalized places, great things or great new policies come forth. And so there's some foreshadowing here about death, related to the graveyard, related to Pedro Orsay, and the Christians and the Moors conflict in general. Okay, and we move on to Albufeira, which is, I believe, it's back in Portugal, and it's a modern tourist hub. You can see the picture at the bottom there. I've put up a little picture that you can see how beautiful and blue and peaceful it looks. But these are temporary homes for people who do not live in this country, and probably would not welcome anybody from this place. And that's important to think of, because this is where there is a major conflict. The rebels take these hotels and begin to live in them and get organized. I think this speaks to the author's Saramago's inherent Marxist politics, and talks and sort of lays out sort of a blueprint for his ideology, and argues against sort of capitalism that comes that tourism engenders, and if you've lived in Alaska for a little while, you can see a little bit of this in our own rental house system, where tourists come up to Alaska and they're only in these houses for 14 days. Sitka has a really bad problem with this. There's a lot of empty houses and nobody's living in them. The people who've lived in these houses cannot live in them, cannot afford to live in them. So he makes some critiques of modern capitalist society and its priorities, and maybe he should. And then we're going to move on to Herrera. So this again isn't on the map. I could not find this anywhere on Google or anywhere else. But I do know that it's near Pacos de Arcos, which is the next section. But this is where they meet Joanna, and she leads the group here. This is where she drew the line in the dirt. And I think this connects the character to the events through her separation with her husband. She's recently divorced, and she went out and the night, and she drew a line in the sand or the dirt, however you want to describe that, which the separation happened about the same time that the peninsula separated, so it's interesting. This act seems like pretty important, and they're there to study, but all they do is just witness that the line cannot be damaged. They try to cover it up, and it just it regenerates, I guess is the best. This is also where they meet the dog, which is arguably a character of the novel, though he doesn't talk. And we don't get to see his thoughts, but we do a little bit, but they begin to follow the blue string, which is where we're going to conclude our journey. But we'll talk about some other things before we do. They go to Pacos de Arcos. I kind of put these out of order, but this is where they met Joanna, and then they did and then they went and studied the line, and this is where we lose the starlings. Now, I'm not smart enough to figure this one out, or make a educated guess about it. If the starlings represent migration, then possibly we're saying something about migration in general, but I couldn't get it. I think endings of things in novels generally are sort of a death, and if that is consistent with what is being said about death turning into new things, then I think that here possibly shows a new path. So from the starlings following them to them following the blue string and the dog. Okay. So it's a turning point. Regardless, it's a turning point in their understanding of the potential situation, and they also, and this is also where they start understanding that the Azores, or that they might crash into the Azores, and so there's a turn in that, and a little bit of fear as well. The 10th, and I have a couple more, but the 10th here is Santiago de Compostela, which represents the literal and figurative turning point for the group. They cross a border here again, entering into rural Spain, and there's it's described as misty, and so there's like some mystery going on here. There's also the author evokes a sense of antiquity. He uses Galatian drizzle to describe the rain, and I think this has to do with a sort of simpler place, to describe a simpler place or a simpler time, and they're transitioning from what they know to what they don't know. They're still following this blue string. And this is where I end this talk, or this assignment, talking about the blue string. I still have a couple other small things to do in this presentation. They meet Maria Guevara, a widow, and she's like Joanna. She's separated from her husband but not by divorce, but by death, and the frontier is described as a space between places, or as a frontier or a space between places. This space between places, if I'm correct in mapping this out, is basically between the sea and Spain, and there's really she's on a cliff somewhere high above the sea here. Here also a really important detail, and the novel continues obviously, but in the interest of not making this a 2-hour long presentation, I ended here after 11 slides, or 10 slides in 11 places. But this is where the journey takes a not completely, but a different tone. And they trade the deux chevaux for a horse and cart. And I think what the author is trying to express here is a need for us to explore changes for sorry, I lost my train of thought there. So the author wants us to explore changing our ideas with new situations. So in this case, the deux chevaux was not a good vehicle for where they were going and what they were doing, or how they were traveling. So and they needed to adapt to new political or new social realities of the world that they inhabit. Okay, so that is the 10 places. The assignment also asks us to talk about the places where the journeys end. I'll do that briefly. I know you've been watching this for a while, and I'm sorry about that. I can ramble. So Venta Maicena is... Pedro dies before he gets here, but this is where Pedro Orce ends up. So this marks the end of his journey, and the wand, or the staff of destiny, I forget exactly what it's called, is planted on his grave. And I think the significance here is that the movements, political movements in this case, and obviously movements of people across nations, are, even when halted by death, grow from the graves of those who participated in them. Okay, I'm proud of writing that. It represents the lasting impact of individuals have on historical and social movements. Then there's the rest of the characters are a little more ambiguous. There's Maria, Jose, Joaquim, and Joanna are left ambiguous. There's no textual or nothing the author wrote that suggests where they end up. And I actually think this is very hopeful, because that ambiguity suggests that we don't know where life is going to take us, and that regardless of one person or one facet of a movement dying, that others continue on. Okay, and for the last part of this, I'm just going to briefly go over how I believe it worked. the movement of the peninsula worked. This is not a scientific diagram, so it is just supposition, and I think more importantly, looking at it, we can see how it represents the novel's central premise of geographical and metaphorical isolation. So you'll see more in the next slide, but as policies pull us further apart from other nations, we often see distance. Here we see actual distance, literal distance, There's an interesting part at the beginning of the novel where Saramago refers to the happenings at the beginning of the separation as a blackout, and so the Spanish call it apagon, which means just blackout. I looked that one up, but the Portuguese invent the term negrum, and I think with the combination of the starlings and immigration, I think there is an argument here that Saramago could be speaking about migration from other countries as well, such as African migration and Europe's perception of it. And fear of it. There's a lot of fear early on in the novel. People are fleeing from they actually flee to North Africa, so that's kind of where I get this idea from. And I think but regardless, I think these things all represent a kind of displacement and migration related, which are related to contemporary issues. And then somewhere in here, I'm gonna say around day 5 or 10 or 15, they're at Gibraltar watching it float away, or they're floating away. I guess that's more accurate. It's also referred to, the Queen reaffirms, it's a quote, Her Majesty the Queen reaffirms what is referred to as British rights over Gibraltar. This is as it's floating away, which I thought was pretty funny. And then here is what I believe the map would look like. So Pedro Orce dies about the same time, that the Iberian Peninsula stops moving. So that's day 50. And we can see, as I said before, you can see the literal movement here, and how it has separated itself from. You see France over there, and the rest of the mainland Europe. So there's a gradual nature of the separation, and it could symbolize a slow building cultural and political divergence, probably the speed of which the separation happens is an important point in the novel. So all of this sort of leads us to back to the broader themes of isolation, change, and a search for a better way in the shifting world. Anyway, thank you for making it to the end of this 30-minute presentation. If you're still here, please like and subscribe.